This is the Meat and Potato Sports Show. Thanks for listening. This is the 10th episode of the show, 10th anniversary, if you will, already. It's exciting. Essentially, the format of the show, as you probably know by now, is a weekly format where we will recap the best sports stories of the week and keep you up to date on the sports world. For example, in today's show, we will cover topics that occurred the week of April 16th, 2018. So we got an exciting show today. We got draft week coming up. So what do you say we jump right into it head first? Okay, I want to start the show off with some draft rumors or whispers, so to speak. Mainly because the first thing I want to cover in today's show is my mock draft, which are always fun. Because I'm kind of a draft geek, like I'm sure a lot of you are, and I've been pondering this stuff for what seems like forever now, and I really think I have some interesting ideas here. Now, you know, as with any mock draft, they could all be right or all be wrong. Nobody knows. That's the fun of it. But okay, so there's actually 3 rumors or whispers, if you will, that I wanted to mention that I came across. So the first one is the Browns. There's a report that the Browns could take a quarterback with the 1st and 4th picks. That would be pretty crazy, kind of unheard of, as far as I know. I don't know that that's ever been done before, but that was reported as a possibility. I'm leaning toward that's not true, but a part of me does kind of believe it because they've whiffed on quarterbacks so many times. This could be them hedging their bets and making sure that they come out of this draft with very reduced chances of them drafting a quarterback that is ultimately a bust. The next whisper is per Jay Glazer, who came out with a report that said the Giants are likely to draft Saquon Barkley with their 2nd overall pick. I have mixed feelings on this as well, but not so much. A big part of me says, I was very shocked to see this. There's no question the Giants need a quarterback, if not now, which is very, very arguable, but in the very near future. Because you got Eli Manning, who is 37, I believe, going to be 38, and not getting any younger. So yeah, kind of hard to know what to make of that one, because, you know, Jay Glazer's obviously very, very reputable, but in the back of my head, I'm just like, that doesn't make any sense. And then I start wondering if they leaked that to someone, meaning the Giants, to stir things up. I don't know. And then the third whisper was another report or leaked comment on Josh Rosen. Unfortunately for him, it was a negative one again. Poor kid. And basically what it was saying is that he's uncoachable. We don't know what coach said this, if it was, NFL saying that he thinks he'll be uncoachable, or if it was a college coach. We have no idea who it was, but we know it's an anonymous coach who made these comments. All right, and with that out of the way, now on to the fun stuff. Okay, so here it is, my official mock draft. Okay, let's jump into it. So, first round and first pick, I believe the Browns will take Sam Darnold. He has the lowest bust potential. He's got great footwork. He's got a quick enough release. All of his fundamentals are pretty sound. And like I said, most importantly, he has the lowest bust potential. He's a sturdy and strapping young fellow who I believe the Browns need under center, mostly because of where they are located and the weather they have there. And we've really only heard good things about this kid. He's got a good head on his shoulders, seems to come from good stock. It seems like he has a really, really good family. Parents seem like nice people. His mom was on First Things First on FS1 the other day. Seems like a very nice lady. From what you can tell on TV, they seem to get along and have what seems, like a good relationship. Like I said, I feel silly saying that because what can you really tell from a short segment on a TV show? But at the same time, there are body language cues you can sometimes pick up or things like that, and it all seemed positive and happy, joy. On to number 2, the Giants. So like I said, there's a lot of hubbub that they really, really like Saquon Barkley, and they're most likely going to take him. I just find this so hard to believe. It's not like most teams to pass up a great quarterback draft like this one, especially with a quarterback that has the age that Eli Manning has. Like I said earlier, he's about 37, 38. I don't know. So I don't know why you would pass up a great quarterback draft for a running back when you have the 2nd overall pick, and as the Giants franchise, that doesn't come along very often, they're not going to get a second overall pick in the foreseeable future, very likely. And so it is for all these reasons I just mentioned. I think when it's all said and done, they'll decide to take Josh Allen. He's another quarterback that has a big frame and an even bigger arm. The kid's got a complete cannon. He has some concerns with accuracy, but, kind of like how Eli has now. And it's something that the Giants and the quarterback coaches were always constantly working with Eli on, sometimes to avail, sometimes to no avail. So I believe with a young quarterback that's like a sponge, you can keep at it and pray to the football gods that the hard work pays off. But the main reason I liked Allen for the Giants, the more and more I thought about it, is who do they have at receiver? OBJ, Odell Beckham Jr., one of the greatest receivers, some people would say the greatest receiver in the league. So he needs someone that can throw the deep ball well. Enter Josh Allen, who has a cannon strapped to his shoulder. And I believe that'll end up being a great combo. Eli tends to be very successful with the deep throws, so I think a transition when Eli ends up retiring from that to Josh Allen, who can throw a deep ball, and hopefully very well when they continue to work on his accuracy, will mean great things for the New York Football Giants. Moving on to pick number 3, you have the New York Jets. Now, this is where I believe Josh Rosen comes in. You got New York elites, you got a smart guy who's not afraid to speak his mind. Some may say that would be a clash for New York, but I believe that's just the thing the New York Jets would kind of like at the end of the day to distinguish themselves against their big brother, the New York Football Giants, keep themselves maybe more so in the media atmosphere, so to speak. He's got great fundamentals, sound really everything. His only question is durability, which isn't the worst we've ever seen, and hopefully it can be improved through strength and conditioning. And then the other knock against him is how outspoken he is in terms of politics and social justice causes, what have you. Well, New York, if there's anywhere that wouldn't be as big of a deal, would be New York. They tend to lean in that direction and agree with a lot of the things he speaks about, I would assume. So I don't think they see that as a deal breaker and believe he would be a nice fit for them. Moving on to number 4, we have the Cleveland Browns again. I believe this is when they will take Saquon Barkley. It's a safe time to take him. They already have taken their quarterback, is what I mean by that, so they can safely pick him without any worry. Now, this is if he hasn't already gone in the second round for the Giants, like is currently being speculated. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Saquon Barkley is obviously by far the best running back in this draft, but with that being said, there's a handful at the very least of other running backs who are viable, is how I would put it. Essentially meaning that, they would be able to move the sticks for you, and often, but they just wouldn't have that explosive nature that Barkley has. And on top of that, Barkley's also got a great pair of hands. And it's always nice to have an extra receiver in your running back in today's passing league. And, there's a lot of people saying they should take a defensive player with this 4th overall pick that the Browns have, but I totally understand them wanting to take a running back, another offensive player with this position, if they do, simply for the fact that, can you imagine if they hit a home run with their choice of quarterback, and then on top of that, they have a running back who's essentially guaranteed to be a home run in the NFL as well? Then you have 2 very important positions essentially laid out for the foreseeable future. On to number 5, and this is when things start to get interesting. So who do you think I pick in number 5? Well, you guessed it, because you are that smart. I'm taking Baker Mayfield for my mock draft pick. I think the Denver Broncos will go with Baker Mayfield. Why, you ask, after they flopped with Tim Tebow, as some people have drawn the comparison? Because I don't see him as Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow ran to run. He liked running. He was essentially a running back who liked to snap the ball under center, I guess. I don't know why he would play quarterback when he was really a running back. That's what he was. He liked running. Run. So I think that's an unfair comparison because that's not Baker's game. Baker is essentially an escape artist. He really only runs when he has to. And guess who else had that play style? John Elway. See the connection there? See where I'm going with this? I don't think what I just said is too uncanny and that unreasonable. And I feel like a lot of people are either missing it or overlooking it or just disagree and think I'm a whack job for saying that, which is fine. but I think it has to be thought, and it has to be considered, and it really isn't that unreasonable. John Elway was a fierce competitor. Well, guess who else is a fierce competitor? Baker Mayfield. He may have made a couple mistakes and maybe even is a bit rough around the edges, but I believe with maturity, a lot of that dust can be shaken off. Moving on to pick number 6 is the Colts, and I was kind of torn, to be completely honest, when making this pick. I was torn between the Colts either taking Bradley Chubb or Quentin Nelson. They could use both. I mean, there's no question that Andrew Luck could use some more protection, especially with the injuries he's been battling, the shoulder injury he's been battling, rather. But with all that being said, solid defensive players are hard to come by, especially at the defensive end position. And Bradley Chubb is looking like he's going to be a really solid defensive end in the NFL. So at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, I think the Colts will take Bradley Chubb. Having a key pass rusher is so key in today's passing league. So I think it's really hard for a team to pass up the opportunity to pick one up when it presents itself. Moving on to number 7, you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. With Bradley Chubb off the table, I believe the Bucs will take the opportunity to upgrade their secondary, which is something they need to do, and they'll snag the number 1 overall cornerback prospect in this draft, which is Denzel Ward. Not really much to say here other than number 1 overall cornerback prospect. Moving on to number 8, we have the Chicago Bears. I believe they're going to take Quentin Nelson with their pick. They have a young quarterback, Mitchell Trubisky, as you know, and a young quarterback could always use more protection, and Quentin Nelson is an absolute behemoth at almost 330 pounds and 6'5". So yeah, he's the kind of guy that earns the nickname Tiny. Moving on to the 9th pick of the draft, you have the San Francisco 49ers, who I believe will take Calvin Ridley. They really need a good wide receiver, and while Ridley is a bit of an enigma or mystery in some ways, there's no question he possesses talent, and they're in so big of a need of a wide receiver. I could see them taking Ridley and giving Garoppolo another weapon to throw to. Moving on to the 10th pick of the draft, you have the Oakland Raiders, who I believe will take Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's a defensive back from Alabama. They could use some help in their secondary. The only thing is they need to make sure that they break the curse of Alabama cornerbacks or defensive backs being flops in the NFL. So fingers crossed for that, for their sake. But yeah, it's weird. Alabama has a weird history of their defensive backs not doing so hot in the NFL, which I personally think is a lot of it is you have these players who maybe are marginal or mediocre, but the Alabama system, Nick Saban's system, kind of elevates them to the next level and makes them shine and makes them look like maybe a better player than they are. I don't know how to say that nicer, but yeah, so I think that's kind of what you have going on there. But hopefully that's not the case with Minkah Fitzpatrick, and the Raiders get a bargain with their first overall pick. And that does it for my mock draft. I'm only doing the top 10, so comment below and let me know which ones you agree with, disagree with, if I'm completely right, if I'm completely wrong, or if I'm just a total wacko, or all the above. I don't know. I asked you to tell me. What are you asking me for? Oh, forgive me for the comedy relief, folks, or lack thereof. These next 2 stories that are connected can be potentially very saddening for football fans. The first is that Brady and Gronk missed the start of New England offseason workouts, which was on April 16th, and there was a report that came out that Brady is leading an open revolt, in quotes, against Belichick and the Patriot culture. So there's essentially a fox in the hen house, and the fox is Tom Brady, and there's a coup against Napoleon, aka Belichick. I'm not entirely sure why I just called Belichick Napoleon, but now I'm wondering why I hadn't done it sooner, and more importantly, to be honest, why no one else has. At any rate, that's the first report that reared its ugly head, and then I saw something else pop up in the news that I saw as connected to this, and that is that Brady still has not committed to playing in the 2018 season. So it's speculated that he may or may not retire, What I'm really hoping is that this can just be chalked up to frustration that's still rearing its ugly head like a nasty hangover after that last Super Bowl loss that they just went through, and it's just frustration and Brady essentially throwing a grown man's reasonable temper tantrum about it, which he's totally well within his rights to do so. I mean, we all know Belichick, aka Napoleon, completely blew that last Super Bowl for the Patriots, and that should have resulted in a victory for them, but it didn't. So that's the Brady of it all, if you will. But then you have Gronk, who's out there riding dirt bikes in Gillette Stadium and just having a grand old time doing anything but football, apparently. I kind of see him along the same lines. He's just frustrated, and, he's kind of flirted with retirement the last couple years or whatever and talked about it. But I think when he really gets down to brass tacks and thinks about it, he really loves football and can't see him doing anything else just yet. I mean, he kind of has the idea of doing other things, but I don't think he wants to jump to them just yet. Like acting, being in the WWE. I think he likes those things and wants to do them in the future, but I think he still really, really enjoys football, and it's fun for him, and he doesn't want to leave it just yet. Now, with that being said, I think the Super Bowl loss that they faced kind of put a kink in the armor of that line of thinking for Gronkowski. So I don't know. I'm really hoping neither of them leave, but we'll just have to wait and see is what it really comes down to. We can speculate till the cows come home and kind of build a better prediction as to what will happen as more information comes out, but that's really all we have for now. So I think it's best just to remain positive, wait for more information on the subject to trickle out of the Patriots locker room like it seems to be doing a lot of these days. The one thing I will say is I don't think it's in Brady's nature to leave the game after a loss as disappointing as the last one they just had. I mean, Nick Foles, a backup quarterback, beats you in your last Super Bowl ever, your last playoff game ever, in your last season ever. I just don't see Brady being okay with that. And then speaking of frustrated players, a report came out that Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers is, quote, frustrated with the Green Bay front office, to which Aaron Rodgers responded,
"It's fake news, okay? Okay, it's fake news. Why would I be frustrated? Everyone knows I'm the best quarterback. It's fake news, okay? Nobody loves the Green Bay front office more than I do, okay? Fake news. You're fake news. I mean, just wait till the new season starts. You're gonna get so sick of waiting, you won't even want to win anymore."
Okay, so maybe Aaron Rodgers didn't turn into President Trump personified, but he did call it, quote, fake news, which I thought was hilarious and clearly led to an excuse for a Trump impression. But either way, I could totally see this story being a result of Aaron Rodgers leaking it to the press. I mean, you had him kind of complaining earlier within a month ago, but it was recently, where he was complaining about some front office decisions, namely, I believe one of them was a change in quarterback coach or something to that effect. I'm pretty certain it was a quarterback coach, though, and he kind of passive-aggressively moaned about it and went on the radio and said that he had no idea the change was being made until it was made, which is kind of, a passive-aggressive way of saying, hey, give me a heads up when things like this happen, because they didn't give him a heads up and he wasn't too happy about it. And leaking a story is a great mechanism to get your story out there without attaching your name to it. So he leaks it, gets his message out there, and then still looks like the golden boy when he calls it fake news and dismisses it. I mean, personally, that's what I get from this story when I see it. Continuing on with our trend of disgruntled players, there's a report that Kawhi Leonard has not corresponded with his teammates for weeks now, which some could say could be a cause for alarm for the San Antonio Spurs. I mean, geez, can you imagine? They must be pulling their hair out over there. So that is very clearly a deteriorating relationship between Kawhi and the San Antonio Spurs and Greg Popovich. And speaking of Popovich, our condolences go out to Greg Popovich. His wife recently passed away. It's very sad. Our thoughts and prayers are with him and his family. But at any rate, I believe it's fairly a safe bet to say that Kawhi's going to no longer be with the Spurs after this season. And it looks like the Lakers are going to pursue Kawhi, which is good news if you're a Laker fan. I think he'd be a great addition to the Lakers with all that young talent. I mean, that has the potential for some really, really big numbers and success. So it'll be really interesting to see how that unfolds and how the Lakers pursue him. If they'll have to give up some of their top talent like Brandon Ingram or, I don't know, say Lonzo Ball. Honestly, people will probably flame me for this, but if they can package Lonzo Ball with someone else, not Kyle Kuzma, because I believe Kyle Kuzma is going to be a really big deal in the future. I believe he has future superstar written all over him. But if you can package Lonzo and someone else for Kawhi Leonard, I say you pull the trigger on that as soon as you can. As everyone knows, it's a superstar-driven league, and while Lonzo Ball may be a nice player or a really good role player someday eventually, it's no secret that the Lakers are seriously lacking firepower in the superstar department, and Kawhi Leonard could be exactly what they need to kickstart that franchise back into its former glory. Continuing on with our trend of disgruntled athletes, I'm pretty amazed it's still going. You had Joel Embiid, who was very disgruntled, to say the least, that he was benched in Game 2 because his face injury that he had a facial mask that he had to wear during this injury, and he was still wearing it, and they benched him for Game 2, so he was very unhappy about it. He was social mediaing. Is that a verb? Social mediaing a lot about it, but honestly it paid off because he came back in the later games of this series, and they had success with him when he came back, and it doesn't look like the games that he sat out will ultimately hurt them in the series, because at the time of recording this, the game he sat out, Game 2, is the only game they've lost in the series, and they're up 3-1. So just one more needed to seal the deal on this series against the Heat, and they move on, which is pretty much a given at this point, if you ask me. The 76ers are looking hot. More and more, man. Ben Simmons is pretty unbelievable, in my opinion, and I don't think the Heat have an answer for him. I don't even know why I'm talking about this. It's a moot point. They're going to crush the Heat probably the next time they play them, and they'll get to move on to the next round with a healthy Joel Embiid. Anywho, speaking of wounded Warriors, looks like Steph Curry's going to be out for another 2 weeks or so, which isn't detrimental to the current series that Golden State finds themselves in. They're currently facing the Spurs. They almost swept the Spurs. It looked like it was going to be a sweep, but then the Spurs rallied for a win in Game 4 to keep the series alive. But I expect Golden State to win the next one and close this series out, giving the Spurs a trunk slammer. But with that being said, the Spurs have had some flashes of brilliance, especially Manu Ginobili. Even at his age, he had a great game and just really, really jumped off the screen. If you saw the game, it was quite impressive. But as I was saying, the Warriors are just going to have to hunker down, get through the next couple weeks without Steph Curry, and then they can go back to their normal dominant selves. I don't think it'll be a huge problem for them. You know, they may face some adversity without Steph, but I think they'll ultimately be able to just keep their heads down and hunker through it. I mean, it is pretty amazing how different they are with and without Steph. And he's not even the best player per se on the team, but what he adds to the team and contributes to the team is just second to none. I mean, the way he stretches the floor, he's a threat everywhere on the floor, everywhere. He can make it from anywhere under the basket for a layup, obviously, or all the way at half court, basically, for those long 3 bombs he shoots. I mean, the guy is a total shooting machine. And not only that, he's not afraid to go to the rack every now and then if he needs to. So he is just an absolute headache for every team that he faces. I mean, my heart truly goes out to every team that has to play against him. Okay, let's kind of change gears here and move on to our next topic, which, to be honest, is filled with so much irony. It's ready to burst at any moment. I came across it just, like I always do, perusing random sports stories and sifting through the endless pile of stories, and somehow came across this one. And it's funny because I don't see anyone else talking about this or covering it, so I'm really glad I did find it and am able to share it with you guys, because Well, you'll see why in a second. So the story is LeBron is being sued by Adventure Enterprises, is the name of the business, or LLC, whatever it is. And they pitched a show to him. Well, rather, because they pitched a show to him called Shop Talk, where celebrities share business success stories while in a barbershop while getting their hair cut. Does that sound familiar at all? It should, because it's wildly similar to the premise of the show LeBron airs, where he's in a barbershop sharing stories. They aren't business success stories. They're stories or whatever they want to talk about with other athletes, mostly or all. I'm not sure. I haven't really watched it, to be honest. But from what I've seen, it looks like athletes. And to me, just the irony, it was completely overwhelming when I read the story, because you had LeBron, who was suing Nick Saban last week or whatever it was about a week ago, for the exact same thing. So what's the deal here? Did he get the idea to sue Nick Saban from being sued himself? He's like, screw that. If I'm going to get sued, I'll just cover the cost of my lawsuit by suing Nick Saban for his show. Oh, man. And I'm sure, well, LeBronzies, post your comments below for how mad you are and bagging on me for the story and how I can't stop laughing at it. I just can't get over the irony. Oh, yeah, and for those who don't know, a LeBronzie is a LeBron zombie. It's when you become zombified by your love for LeBron. But at any rate, and listen, I don't have anything against LeBron. He's one of the greatest of all time. I'm just not like the mainstream typical media outlets who praise him in every way possible and are probably not covering the story because it covers him in a negative light. So I don't have the same restrictions that they probably have that stop them from covering the story. So I'm going to do as I damn well please and inform you guys of the story, and hopefully you enjoy it and find it as funny as I did. Anywho, let's move on to the last topic of the show. It's actually regarding a segment in Speak for Yourself where Jason Whitlock, it was a pretty interesting segment. He had an interesting take on something. It was in regards to LeBron and how he called him a relegator instead of an elevator, because everyone's saying how he elevates his teammates' play. So let's roll that first, and then we'll come back and comment on it.
Hi, I'm Jason Whitlock. Last night, we saw what separates Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, and Larry Bird from LeBron James. Last night, in a Game 2 playoff victory the Cavaliers nearly blew to the Indiana Pacers, King James added to his legend, scoring the first 13 points of the contest and 46 overall. In a game the Cavaliers had to have, James was deadly efficient at both ends of the court. He drained 17 of 24 shots, collected 11 defensive rebounds and 2 steals. It was vintage LeBron James. But somehow, at home, against an inferior opponent that played poorly, the Cavaliers could never put Indiana away. Cleveland led by as many as 18 points in the first half, but won by just 3. Why?
We were lucky.
Not quite. It's actually because LeBron relegates his teammates more than he elevates them. And that is the difference between James and the all-time greats, Jordan, Magic, and Bird. That difference, I believe, is driven by the fact that James is an only child and they weren't. I'm no psychologist, but James strikes me as the proverbial kid in the sandbox who plays best when he dictates all the terms of the game. Forced to be the man of the house as a boy, James's instincts demand that he rely on himself. And as he has risen through his profession and ascended to the pinnacle, he's less aware how much he values himself more than his team. James, who chases Jordan's legacy and is often compared to Magic, actually has more in common with Russell Westbrook, a freakish, ball-centric athlete who is difficult to play with. Obviously, James is better than Westbrook, primarily because James is significantly bigger than Westbrook. But their style of play is quite similar. Last night, Cleveland spread and spaced the court with an array of shooters and unleashed James to play one-on-one against a helpless defender. The chosen one was the only one against the Pacers.
Do you need to see more out of Rodney and
I need to
Clarkson?
see more out of a lot of guys.
Yeah.
This is habit. We saw it in his first Cleveland stint when James would single-handedly carry a bunch of B players to regular season success. When James decided to play with other stars and took his talents to South Beach, he turned Chris Bosh into a spot-up shooter, snatched the heat from Dwayne Wade, and implemented the ISO and kick offense he prefers. Only the weather changed when he relocated back to Cleveland. James transformed Kevin Love into a spot-up shooter, snatched the Cavs from Kyrie Irving, and bulldozed Coach David Blatt so the Cavs could run ISO and kick. Yes, Cleveland got a title, but the only one's condescending, passive-aggressive leadership chased Kyrie out of Cleveland. James struggles working with a partner in the coach's chair and on the court. That's why he will leave the game with fewer titles than his talent and skills should have produced. No matter how much you bring to the table, in sports or in a relationship, you can't relegate a partner. You have to elevate. That's what makes LeBron different from Jordan, Magic, and Bird. Jordan elevated Pippen. Magic elevated Worthy and Kareem. Bird elevated McHale and Parrish. LeBron James has spent this entire season elevating himself, praising his accomplishments. He's the only one.
So what'd you guys think of that? Pretty interesting, right? I mean, whether you agree or disagree with it, you have to admit that it is an interesting take on kind of the legacy and kind of overall outlook of LeBron's. But here's what I think about it. I wouldn't go so far as to, say, agree with Whitlock's take on this in this segment. I feel it's a little bit worded a little bit too strongly, calling him a relegator. I don't think he intentionally goes out to lower his teammates a peg, if you will, because, you know, the exact definition of relegate is consigning or dismissing someone to an inferior rank or position. That's the exact dictionary definition. So I think that's a little bit too strong. And here's why. I'm going to give you my kind of no-holds-barred take on this, okay? I don't think LeBron is a relegator. But with that being said, I never really have bought into this whole narrative that he makes people better. He makes everyone better on his team. Now, so that's kind of the negative. The positive is I think the guy's so freaking good and is so skilled at the game in virtually every aspect of it that he brings success to the teams that he's on. It depends how you look at it. It could either be a huge compliment or a huge knock, depending on what narrative is of your choosing. But that's exactly how I look at it. I don't think he makes his teammates better per se. I think he's so good that what his teammates do essentially is irrelevant at the end of the day. Why do I say that? Well, I think, and what really reinforced this way of thinking is watching the series unfold that he's playing in right now against the Pacers. And it even exposed its head a little bit last year against Golden State, but it's really, really rearing its head, to me at least, in this current series against the Pacers, where you have these guys, you know, who did pretty great, you know, but definitely above average performances throughout the regular season. You know, for example, Clarkson, Larry Nance Jr., and the like. Guys coming off the bench that had good production for their teams. When they were on the Lakers, they did pretty well. And then on the Cavs, once they settled in, when they came to the team, they did pretty well. And that's what all the hysteria and hyping was about, was the Cavs had these new teammates and people were really positive as to where they would take their respective team. But I digress. The point is, look at the series LeBron's in now against the Pacers, and you see these people, like I said, who are basically underperforming or not performing to the standards that we thought they would, at least after watching them during the regular season. And then you see LeBron, who's performing pretty great by any standard. I mean, any normal standard, and even for his own, where he's getting triple doubles out the wazoo and being as aggressive as he has been. Now, that being said, I don't think this is the best he's ever played in the series, but, I mean, that just proves my point even more, because he set the bar so high for what good play is by his standards that when he plays like he is now, we're kind of like, wake me up when it's done. you know? But you don't have to be woken out of your slumber if you really think about it, because this guy is scoring in the 30s almost every game, if not every game. I'd have to double check to look for sure, but I know it's around there. And his assists and his rebounds are great. The point is he's contributing a lot to his team. But to drive the final point home, I am not convinced that he's making his teammates better. And I genuinely don't think I'm out of line with that statement. And depending on, I don't know whether you want a particular narrative driven or whatever the case is, I think if you look at that objectively, you will see it as a pretty big compliment as opposed to a knock against him. I mean, think about it, you guys. For years and years and years, over a decade now, it's basically been accepted basketball gospel that if you have LeBron on your team, you are not only going to the Eastern Conference Finals, but you may have a chance in the final championship. And then when Golden State came around, the ladder, the last part kind of changed, because you didn't have so much a shot at the championship as you did before, but you're basically guaranteed a trip to the Eastern Conference Finals, which is huge and obviously has created history, as we've seen. And I believe this is a good place to wrap things up for today's show. 2 quick things before we officially wrap it up. I just wanted to give a couple quick updates on the playoffs. You probably already know, but just in case, we had Golden State defeat San Antonio, the Spurs, in their series, so Golden State moves on. Congratulations to the Warriors. And then we had the 76ers close out their series against the Miami Heat. So the 76ers will be advancing to the next round, and they will be playing either the Boston Celtics or the Milwaukee Bucks, depending on who wins that series. And, that's right, the Warriors will be playing the New Orleans Pelicans. But let me know, post your trees. I'm curious what your picks are. I wonder if they're similar to mine or maybe they're completely different. So post those. I would like to see those. And as always, please give us a like and a subscription to our YouTube channel. It really helps us out and supports us a lot when you do that. Comment below on your thoughts on this show and also what you would like to see covered in next week's show. That helps us out. And also, don't be shy. Let me know what you need help with in your golf game. I'm always happy to help, as you know. I always respond, so just send me private messages. If that's more comfortable for you, I will be happy to help however I can. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Truly hope you enjoyed the show. Please stay tuned for next week's show. Like I said, let me know what you would like to see covered in the comment section below. Your favorite podcaster in chief, EB, signing off.